Tragically, I lost my son, Ben, to a fentanyl overdose. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to endure. It's happening across Canada. Fentanyl is wiping out an entire generation of our people. So we started a foundation, Guardians of Recovery, to help people with mental health and addictions who are struggling and not included in society. We've done a great job of including people with disabilities in our society. Now imagine a world where people with mental health and addictions have that same level of inclusion. That's what we're about to do. We are inviting you to take part in one of the most progressive and creative initiatives of our time, building sober living homes for our people to make sure they are cared for and have an opportunity to completely come off substance and live normal, productive lives. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Guardians of Recovery podcast. Tonight, we have a very, very interesting conversation about cannabis use disorder, cannabis psychosis, a conversation that has lots of controversy around it because some believe that cannabis is not addictive, for example. Some people believe that it's a perfect support system, that they would die without cannabis. And other people believe that cannabis has actually caused them to have unlocked mental illness, caused psychosis and all kinds of things. So tonight, we're not really getting into the debate of it. We're getting into the facts of it. And I have a couple of guests joining me tonight. Sarah Stevenson is here. Welcome, Sarah, for joining us. We're going to take a dive into Sarah's past and her experience with cannabis and really get the facts on the table. What does the government of Canada say about weed? What's happening with what actually is cannabis use disorder? And what is cannabis psychosis? It's showing up an awful lot more lately in hospitals. So we're going to get into all of that. Sarah, welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to this.
So there's a lot of people joined us already. I can see Charmaine. Hello. Hi, everyone. Roxanne. Hi. Hope everyone enjoyed the lovely weather. It was gorgeous out today. So the comments are there for you to ask questions, to be able to give comments, to tell us what your thoughts are as we unravel this conversation. I wanted to start with a couple of quick facts about cannabis so that we're sort of starting from the foundation of what it is that the Canada.ca website says. So what they have found is that an estimated 1 in 3 people who use cannabis will actually develop a problem with its use. So that's a very, very striking high number, first of all. Like 1 in 3 people who use cannabis will develop a problem. And then it's also estimated that 1 in 11 of those who use cannabis will develop an addiction to it. So think about that. 1 in 11 people who use cannabis will develop an addiction. That is a super, super high number. And to make it worse, to add, and probably explains why we see a lot of addiction right now, is that that statistic rises to 1 in 6 for people who are using cannabis as a teenager. So as your brain is still developing, you're a teenager, 1 in 6 teenagers are going to develop cannabis use disorder. Now, in a country where we have 38.9 million people, I did the math here. That means that almost 12 million people are smoking weed in this country. That means 1,200,000 people will actually get cannabis use disorder. Those are striking numbers. So, even if we just even out, say 1 in 10 people who use marijuana will get cannabis use disorder, that is a huge number. And with THC rising and cannabis getting much stronger and CBD, the balancing component of it being lessened, people are blowing their brains out with, 85% THC and then shatter and then adding things to weed as well. So it's a crapshoot out there right now. Anyway, let's, Sarah, talk about your journey with weed. Take us back, way back to when you first started using weed, what it was like for you, and how it developed.
Well, it used to be amazing for me. Well, I was 14 years old when I first started cannabis, and I was so young. Didn't really know the world that much. But being only 14, it used to help me with my anxiety and my depression, even helping me eat more food when I was really not eating at this time. But then it started to progress that I needed it more and more. I needed it to do my daily activities. I needed it to go outside. I needed to see my friends, to go to the grocery store, just to be normalized again. I needed it for every aspect of life. And as I got older, I kept having to need it more and more and more. And that's where it started to become an issue for me. I started to have episodes where I didn't really know what was going on. I didn't really know how to feel. I felt kind of numb at this time. It numbed
Mhm.
my feelings and everything like that. But it also had me thinking things were real when they weren't real. So listening to music, something I loved to do every single day of my life, was something I couldn't do anymore because it was always relaying messages to me. After being hospitalized for the first time when I was 16 years old from cannabis use, it really opened my eyes to like the long-term effects that it does have on your body. Now, even being hospitalized, I still went back to smoking weed when I was released. Because
Mhm. So let's just look at that for a second. So even though you knew it was from weed and you knew you went to hospital, but you still went back to smoking weed. That's a very important piece to look at. I think, Sarah, because that happens to so many people. They don't something happens in their mind that they don't equate the smoking with weed with being admitted to hospital, even though they were tested. They know that's the only substance in their system, even though they know the doctors call it cannabis use disorder. All of those things, even though they have a clear diagnosis, they still come out and continue to um, smoke weed. Do you think that is because at that point the addiction is so strong?
I agree. I think it's so strong at that point that you really think that you need it. This is something you need to feel normal.
Mm.
And without it, you don't feel like that normal feeling that you want to feel. You want to feel normal. You want to wake up and be okay. But I didn't feel okay until I had weed or cannabis to smoke. And that's when I felt normalized. So even after the doctors told me all the negative consequences, what would happen if I continued, I didn't honestly believe them. And I wasn't followed up with after this happened to me either. After I got out of the hospital, they pretty much sent me on my way, and I didn't have any follow-up appointments to like check
Mhm.
down on me to see if I would do this again. So I
Right.
went back to my old ways. And that's another thing, like not having the support after you leave the hospital is a huge thing because it really affects you down the road. And then it leads to more hospitalizations. And that's
Yeah.
what's so bad about it.
Hmm. Now, most people know my journey with my son Ben. I lost my son Ben to a fentanyl overdose last summer. It was an absolute tragedy. But Ben didn't, fentanyl was the last thing. Ben battled with cannabis use disorder for 7 years. That was his drug of choice. It was the thing he could not give up. It was the only thing he ever wanted and absolutely had to have. So he had, a severe, severe addiction. Then Ben was a student with honors with distinction student. He smoked weed. It unlocked bipolar. He had cannabis use disorder, and there was nothing in this world that was going to stop him from smoking weed. He even went to jail and smoked weed in jail. And he told me exactly how he got it in jail. And it was the one thing he never, ever gave up. Therefore, his brain never healed to a point where he could give it up. And so I felt that Ben lived for 7 years with his brain completely hijacked. He wasn't able to even see that he was sick. He didn't have self-reflection. He didn't have the capacity to choose whether or not he got help. He was like stuck in his own brain, and it was definitely cannabis, which was a result. Now we have some pretty big statements coming in here now. Most, if not all, people who use cannabis will deny this, unfortunately. The anger issues in this use of cannabis regularly before the age of 25 are well known. So stop your denial, people. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why they don't have it on packages. Like, your brain is not developed until 25. If you use it, there's 1 in 6 chance that you're going to get cannabis use disorder as a teen. And 1 in 11 chance that you're going to get cannabis use disorder. That should be on the package the way it is with tobacco, for example. And here we have, speaking as a teacher, I have students in high school who tell me that they are not addicted to weed, but that they are dependent. That they are dependent. I wish I understood that. It's ruining lives. I preach, don't try it ever. Yeah, so that's a teacher's perspective. I hear what this young lady is saying every single day. So that's some Facebook user. Hi, Sarah. So proud of you. I love you. That's one of your fans. Absolutely. He was heartbreaking. And it's just as addicting as illegal drugs. Yeah, it absolutely is. I lived with it every single day. I will say, that there were incidences that occurred when Ben started to smoke weed. The minute he smoked weed, it was the beginning of the end for Ben. So it was horrific experience. So let's go back to your experience now and talk about, like, what was that journey like when you had to go to hospital? What happened in the hospital? What was your psychosis like? What was going on in your mind? What happened?
So what happened, and the anger issues comment that somebody just wrote is a huge thing. I started getting angry over the littlest things. Like, everything made me angry. And I'd have these big lows and these big highs. And I would just be, when I was in hospital, I would have these big angry outbursts. And I couldn't control myself because it was coming out of my system. And while it was coming out of my system, I was having all these big outbursts. I was not who I am today. I would be angry. I would be so mad. I'd be screaming and yelling and crying and just losing control of myself. I couldn't even listen to music at one point when it ended up leading to bipolar disorder,
Mm-hmm.
which is now well managed now that I've stopped using cannabis. But people don't realize that by prolonged use of it can lead to these disorders that you will have for the rest of your life, and
Yeah.
some things that are so hard to deal with on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for Bennett, unlocked bipolar. And then, in our family members, my brother, also my oldest brother, Rob, who eventually died to, complications with his disorder. He was heavily medicated, but he was my older brother. It started when he started smoking weed. And he went into, I guess, an extreme psychosis. We had to take him down to New York and get him hospitalized, and he wouldn't sleep for days and days on end. And that's part of it too. And anyway, his whole life he battled with that, and he was heavily medicated just to survive in this world. And finally, he died way too young and out of an accident. But even his medications, he couldn't look left or look right. He was so heavily medicated. And, I had his phone when he passed, and he was still on his phone. He was still trying to get weed and looking for weed. And it's very much an addiction. And so it's so sad to see. I have a few other key messages here from the Canadian government about weed. They did a report, like a summary report. They said unequivocally, cannabis is addictive. So for the people who say it's not for you, but it is for 1 in 11 adults and 1 in 6 teens. So cannabis is addictive, but not everyone who uses it will develop an addiction. So there you go. If you use cannabis regularly, like daily or almost daily, and over a long time, several months or years, you may find that you want to use it all the time and have cravings associated with it and become unable to stop on your own. And stopping cannabis use after prolonged use can produce cannabis withdrawal symptoms as well. So, people need to recognize, like you said, that you can actually change your personality and end up with bipolar disorder caused by weed, exacerbated by weed. So the additional messages they have for youth is that when a teen or young adult as brain is still developing, they're more likely to become addicted to cannabis, as we've said. And cannabis addiction can have a negative effect on how teens study, how they work, how they hang out with friends, personal isolation. There's a lot of that stuff that happens. And the number one thing that people say is if you feel like you have an issue with cannabis, reach out and get help. It's my experience that that's the absolute last thing that people do. And let's hear from some more. Hi, Tina. Thanks for the invite. This is Jillian. I'm so proud of you, Sarah. This is fascinating. Was the bipolar disorder caused by weed and exacerbated by weed? In the case of my brother, absolutely. The same thing with Ben. And I have a lot of other family members who the exact same thing happened. So genetic predisposition is there, and the weed just unlocks all of that. So, can cannabis actually cause psychosis? Yes, absolutely. Research has shown that marijuana can cause psychosis. And if you want to go on to the Cleveland Clinic's website, it's where I get a lot of research from Dr. David Stream. He's a psychiatrist there. He's got a lot of work there on marijuana and its psychosis. And I had a family member who was admitted to the hospital 3 times from cannabis use disorder and psychosis. And the doctors at the time said that there is, since legalization, 4 times more psychosis in people showing up in the hospital from marijuana. So that's something they should put on the label as well. Not just the grams, but how likely it is that you're going to get cannabis use disorder or cannabis use addiction. Yeah, wild. So tell us some more things about your experience.
So more things that started to happen was it all started to happen so slowly but got quicker at the end. So I couldn't listen. So my favorite thing in the world was listening to music, watching TV. But when I went into psychosis, I couldn't even listen to music. I couldn't watch TV. I didn't even know who my family was at one point because I thought everyone was out to get me. I thought, and this was the psychosis taking over my brain and making the people that I love seem like strangers to me. I
Yeah.
remember my fiance looking at him and not knowing who he was, and him looking at me like, what is going on? And it was because of the prolonged use of me smoking cannabis. And it just had these long term effects that I couldn't get over. And looking back on it now, seeing how sick I was, even in the moment, it still didn't give me enough to want to stop because I didn't believe that weed could do such a thing.
Yeah,
But
that's
and it's
that's the
so
thing.
true.
It's like people just think, no, that's not going to happen to me, or no, it's definitely. I remember when Ben was first diagnosed, or first the school found him with weed, and they expelled him, and we went. Like a mom who's going to try everything to help her son. I brought him over to the police station around the corner there, and said that Ben, this is what happened to Ben, and trying to sort of bring it home to him, the severity of it. And the police officer looked at me and said, "Lady, you have way bigger problems than your son having weed on school premises." He could just tell by looking at him that, he had no cause and effect. And I could have told him that he was going to jail, or he was going to, you know, Tim Hortons for coffee, and it was just nothing there.
Yeah.
It was the saddest, saddest thing. Okay. Thank you for the answer. I guess that is. And did the meds for bipolar help with cravings for weed? The case of my brother probably would have died without medication. He was severely sick. I spent decades with him, helping him. He would go into psychosis often. I feel like it was every time he went back to weed. Um, it was something that he didn't fully give up even to the end of his life. So he never was truly fully well, and he was on like 8 different medications. Then he ended up getting, all kinds of complications from medication plus diabetes, and it was just not. He suffered a lot, a lot. I found him in the most horrific situations in psychosis. It's unspeakable what happens to some people in psychosis. Okay. When I was when I have cocaine psychosis, I can't have fans on or anything. I sweat to death in the summer because I have to be able to hear everything, even unplugged my refrigerator so that I can hear everything. It was horrible. Yeah, psychosis has got to be the scariest thing, doesn't it? Isn't it?
It
Like
is so scary.
you get to a point where you can't trust your own mind. Like, I think that's got to be the scariest thing that a person could ever go through, because if you can't trust your own mind, then what do you have in the world to provide you with any stability?
Exactly. And even like reading that comment, even like the same thing would happen to me. I would have to like I would be hearing things, thinking people are talking about me. I couldn't softball is something I love with my dear life. I love it. It's my favorite sport. It's something I do every day. And I couldn't even go to the softball field because my mind was playing tricks on me, thinking everybody was talking about me. Everyone was looking at me. The paranoia starts to kick in. And even being home, I'd hear these little noises and stuff and think that people were trying to like send these messages, and your mind takes over, and not having control of your mind is the scariest thing in the world. Nothing
Yeah.
will ever beat that feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine. Like, it's got to be so. I used to feel so bad, when I would have family members in psychosis, because they really didn't know what was going on. And even the smallest little sound, like unwrapping a candy wrapper, would be like overwhelming sound in their brain. It was like,
Yeah.
you couldn't even walk across the floor because sounds were like exemplified to the max. And that's all part of the psychosis. And as a family member watching it happen, like sometimes I would watch and I just didn't know if they were ever going to come back, my loved ones. It was so difficult.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah. I never want to go back to that life. I fight it every day. Yeah. So proud of you, Sarah. Wish my son was as strong as you are. Well, that's the thing, it's less about strength and more about how much time you can have not using weed. Because as long as you're using weed, your brain is hijacked and you don't have capacity to make a decision. Right, Sarah? So tell us about your experience, like how you actually addressed the weed and how you came off it and what it took.
It actually took another hospitalization of 3 months. During this hospital stay, I was off weed completely altogether. At first, I couldn't sleep, so they obviously had to give me some medication to help me with sleeping and stuff like that. It took 3 full months for me to come out of this. It felt like a coma. Like you're there, but you're not actually there.
Yeah.
And it took 3 full months for me to actually feel normal again. And it was a long time, but I even got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and bipolar, something I never had before smoking weed. And
Yeah.
that's scary. That's something I'll deal with for the rest of my life now. It's obviously well maintained now that I'm not using cannabis,
Hmm.
but it took 3 months. It took counseling, it took support systems, it took my family, it took my friends to actually be able to be better. It took my kids like fighting for them, just wanting to be better. but it took a long, long time, and it's still something I struggle with every day because it's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
But knowing not wanting to feel that fear again of losing control is something that keeps me straight and on the right path. But it's
Mhm.
something that is so hard to deal with because it affects your mind. You really
Yeah.
think you need it and you want it, and it's the only thing that's going to make you feel better. That's the hardest part of getting over it, is knowing that you actually don't need it. You
Yeah.
really don't need it.
And that's the misconception that Ben was under. He was like, I have this is the only thing that allows me to feel okay and survive. And it was actually the only thing that was taking his life. And
Exactly.
it's so ironic. It's the complete opposite. And I see so many people in that exact position, not just family members, but friends and colleagues at work. I mean, we literally have over a million people in Canada with cannabis use disorder right now. Like, that's insane when you think about it. And then, of course, doing weed and in psychosis and not having cause and effect, then you go try other drugs, shatter, coke, crack, and onto opioids. And that was Ben's fate and journey. And it was just brutal to watch a person go from where he was the most amazing, like, person, gentle giant who had the whole world in front of him, and to watch him deteriorate over 7 years, it was just shattering,
It's very sad.
unimaginable.
Something
Yeah,
you would never think about having. It's even worse having to watch someone go through it than actually dealing with it, because you're seeing them be so good at one point and then watching them slowly fade away each day by day by day. And
it is.
thinking of how I done that to my family, it just breaks my heart that they had to see me that way.
Well, you know what? Your family's so thankful, I bet, that you came out the other end, because watching someone deteriorate and not come through it is just beyond. But it's a real victory for the people who do. So I'm so thankful that you are. Tina, I can totally relate to everything you're saying, and you too, Sarah. God bless you, Sarah. Adrian O. I'm not sure what that means. I'm sorry you guys will be listening, though. I had an accent here, but I will be listening. Everything's okay, though. Okay. Wishing you the best, whoever that is who had an accident. Okay. Shauna, are you there? Let's see if we have. Hi, Shauna.
Hi.
Hi. Welcome to the show. So, folks, tonight we also have another willing participant to talk about her journey with cannabis, Shauna. Um, some people go into a deep addiction, and some people go into cannabis psychosis, and then other people kind of are using weed. They don't necessarily have a full blown psychosis, but they have a different type of I guess, reaction to cannabis. So different people have different reactions as well. Shauna, tell us about your journey with cannabis. Take us right back to the beginning.
Right
And
back. Okay, so I'm in recovery 11 years now. Marijuana was not my drug of choice.
Mhm.
Initially, I gave up everything. I wouldn't drink. I wouldn't, it all became hand in hand for me. So I gave up absolutely everything.
Mhm.
About 4 years into my recovery of my drug of choice, I started to use cannabis again. First it was occasional, and then it came full blown, all day, all night. I used it to eat, I used it to sleep. And at this point, I think it was like becoming socially acceptable, like not legal, but socially acceptable. Well, it kind of always was, I guess.
Yeah.
So, anyways, at that time, I continue to, could be worse. I could be using my drug of choice. There was always an excuse.
Right.
So eventually, after a couple of years, it started to give me a lot of anxiety. That I can remember, because I have a lot of it blocked out too, because I picked up a lot of trauma during my addiction.
Yeah.
So at some point, it started to give me anxiety, and I found I was wanting to sleep a lot, and it no longer was working for me. So I stopped. And I still am in recovery, not using my drug of choice, not drinking, just the marijuana use. And like, again, I stopped. So then a little while had passed and I picked it up again. And it wasn't long before I started. Now, I've been using cannabis since young age. Like, it was probably one of the first things. I think I drank first and then I started using cannabis, but it was like a lifelong thing, right? So I started again in recovery about 4 years in. Then I stopped because it gave me the anxiety, and I picked it up again casually, and all of a sudden it was full blown again, day in, day out. Go ahead.
Some people, they get into recovery and they say, well, I'm only smoking weed. That's not an addiction. That's not an issue for me. And they continue to smoke weed because they're no longer doing coke or they're no longer doing the opioid. That's a reason and a justification, but it doesn't always work out, does it?
No, absolutely. Well, for me, it didn't. So I picked it up again and again. At this point, it had become legal, and then across the board, it's like, society's idea that it's okay. It's like, and I used to even say, I have a daughter who struggled as well, and I'd be like, oh, it's like, when she stopped doing other stuff, and she was like, as long as she was just smoking marijuana, I was okay. Yeah. So just recently, actually, in the last couple of months, probably, I don't even know the exact date, because I'm going to be honest, I didn't wake up one day and go, I'm going to stop using cannabis now because it's hindering my recovery. I have a really complex story. There's a lot of stuff, but I literally, last year came out of like a really trauma bond relationship, and I started to pull myself together. But just recently I was in a relationship with a drug addict, and I started to, like, even just before I started to leave that, I started to get busy myself. Like, that's like, I started working and I started doing a lot of self-care, and I finally started showing up for myself. Anyways, I got busy, and it just didn't like I'd go all day without using, like, smoking or whatever, and the desire just left, and I stopped smoking. And then it's like, I don't even know how to explain it, and I can't even tell you the exact date, because again, I didn't wake up with this and say, oh, I'm going to stop using or smoking cannabis now. It just happened. And for like probably 3 months now, I haven't been smoking. And it's like the last couple of weeks, because at first when you would talk about this, I'd be like, this woman's crazy. Like, you know what I mean? It's the lesser of two evils. But I did start smoking at an early age, and it did hinder some of my, and not just solely that, but everything that was going on, some of my development. And in the last couple of weeks, I'm like, hold on now, wait. It literally kept me stuck in the addict cycle. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I was using it to cope. And then all of a sudden it was giving me anxiety, and it's just, I don't even know how to explain it, because I'm still trying to process it myself. And I don't know what anybody else's story is, but I can tell you right now that for me, it kept me stuck in addiction. Really, really bad.
And it interferes with like your productivity and stuff, like you were telling me earlier. And you don't realize that until you come out of it, and you become super productive, like who you're meant to be, or your full potential is there. And then you look back and you're like, holy crap, I was like half of what my capacity was in life, or even less. Like, I didn't see those things, or I didn't take it on. I myself know I smoked weed. Like, weed is not my preference. I used to like smoking hash, And I thought it was, great. It made me artistic and all these different things. But looking back, it clouds the brain. For me, it clouded the brain in such a way that I could not see that it was in the way. And I didn't have my full capacity. I didn't have my full potential, wasn't out there. And you can't see that when you're in it. You see that after you come out of it.
Exactly.
And that's something, oh, sorry, Sarah.
Oh, no, go ahead.
I remember a couple of years ago, I had a friend and she would say to me, like, I would smoke and she'd be like, you're not eating. When my boyfriend smokes, all he does is eat. And I didn't, because it was affecting and I look back now, but it was literally affecting the same thing that my drug of choice, like my dopamine and stuff like that. And if I wasn't using, I wasn't getting any pleasure. And do you know what I'm saying? Like, it just, like, I wouldn't eat. And it's when I look back at it now, I actually could vomit because I spent a long time coping and not healing. And I blamed it on so many other factors, like relationships I was in or things I was doing. And it literally was the harm reduction, the lesser, society's idea that it's not an addiction. Like, I remember people saying, oh, you can't get addicted to that. Well, guess what? I can. Literally addicted to anything. So it very much hindered my recovery and my healing, along with other things. But now I look like when we first started talking about this, I'm like, that's not right. But it is for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult for people to see it when they're in it. That's the thing. And even for myself, like if I was, back when I was smoking hash, and I wasn't a regular smoker or a daily smoker or anything like that, I found myself in finding my purpose in life, being, putting myself into my work, putting myself into my kids and my family, putting myself into having a purpose and really expressing myself in that. And then, anything else was secondary when it came to substance. And luckily it didn't have an addiction, but I do distinctly know that giving it up entirely changed my brain. And I saw that I've seen that happen over and over with people who actually do come out of it, and how, they change. And so the question really is, who are you without that substance? Who are you without weed? Who are you without hash? And who are you when you're on it? What's it stifling? There's a couple of life. I fight for it every day. I think we saw that one. So proud of you, Sarah. Tina, I can totally relate. Let's see. God bless you, Sarah. Oh, yeah, I've been through a few of these. So are you guys? Oh, got that one. Oh, here we go. Back on track. Nice to see you, Shauna. Seen your demand for detox and rehab. It was amazing. Someone liked your video. Okay. Hey to all the beautiful, strong ladies. Yes. Okay. That phrase, "it's only weed," is an uneducated one. Clearly, these beautiful people would never do this to themselves if they had known that. We need more education in schools for everyone, not just for students. That's so true. I feel like getting on a speaking circuit and telling the story of what happened to Ben, I think it would really make a difference. It's like a drug or whatever turns on a person. Yeah, I mean, like weed, as soon as you smoke it, you know that it changes your brain because you're stoned. So, anything that makes you stoned, and especially at like 70, 80% THC, you're whacked out of your trees, or whether you're smoking it or you're taking it, in edibles or whatever, you're still stoned. Let's call a spade a spade. And then when you try to get off it, you go through some serious withdrawals and can't sleep.
It's probably one of the things that I withdrew for the longest, because if I remember correctly, it stays in your fat cells,
Yeah.
and like depending on how much you smoke, it could stay longer. And I'm like woman enough to admit it was the hardest thing that I've had to detox from.
Yeah.
Mentally, emotionally. People say it doesn't affect you, you can't withdraw from it. No. No, you live in my body for that 3 to 4 weeks and tell
Yeah.
me you can't withdraw it. Like, you are supposed to sleep when you're healing. There's the nightmares are insane. Like, they were insane for me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, and that's the thing. It's now the thing is, because some people don't have cannabis use disorder and some people don't have cannabis psychosis, they say they take that and say, well, that's not possible because it doesn't happen to me. It's not happening to you. But we know from the cases of people that are showing up in the hospital what's happened to ourselves, what's happened to our loved ones, that this is actually the truth of what happens. These are the facts. We have this many people, over 1 million people, dealing with cannabis use disorder in Canada right now. All the teens in school, for you teachers, 1 in 6 of your kids has cannabis use disorder, and you know it because you deal with it every day. And for adults in the workplace, 1 in 11 people have cannabis use disorder. Not only do they have cannabis use disorder, they're stoned on their job sites, they're stoned in the campsites, they're stoned working machinery. And all of that is taking place. And we're all pretending like it's not happening because now it's legal and it's acceptable. It's more acceptable to smoke weed than it is to smoke cigarettes right now. Like,
Yeah,
it's like, oh, let's go smoke some weed, but don't tell anyone you're smoking cigarettes.
it's
Like,
so true.
right? It became taboo to smoke cigarettes in society once we realized how bad it was for us. But because of legalization with weed, now it's, it's the let's smoke weed wherever, doesn't make any difference. And 5 years from now, when we realize how many people it's negatively affected, it'll be taboo just like cigarettes. So you can either take it on right now and do yourself a favor and not get psychosis. If it's in your family, see, that's it. 70% of this is genetic. And so if it runs in your family, your likelihood of getting it is so, so much higher. Hi, BM, my sis, love ya. I don't know what you're still here, but I'm so glad you did come. The group on Sunday is awesome, sister. Okay. I used to smoke weed to sleep, and since I stopped, I can't sleep well. Okay. Tracy has a different experience. I will remind you on Sunday, my sister. Okay. Actually, I quit cigarettes today, but I do vape. Way to go with the cigarettes. Vapes will get you in the end in the lungs. But you know what? It's like everybody has an addiction. And when you take on an addiction, you're really taking on yourself, right? It's like what level of self-love do I need to have to overcome this? So, Sarah, tell us about how you actually overcame it, because you went right into the throes of psychosis. And, you know, what was the actual thing that had you stop?
I was actually told by a doctor that if I didn't stop doing this, that I was basically going to die, and that was like that my mind was going, and it probably wouldn't have came back. And when I heard those words, and I have children, and it scared me. It did. It scared me. It put the fear of God in me, and I just wanted to get better for my family. But stopping it was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It is one of the hardest drugs to come off of, I think, because you do it for so long, but it takes so long for it to come out of your system that you want it not to feel that way, but it takes so long to not feel that way anymore.
Yeah. Like for my loved one, it was being hospitalized for over 3 months before they could actually make a decision to get off weed, because it took 3 months for the brain to actually heal. So in the case of Tracy, where she used to smoke weed and stopped and now can't sleep, after the 3-month mark, that's probably going to get better.
Yes.
Like, I'm not a doctor. I just know from lived experience and what I've seen it with my loved ones in our family situation. But, so there's something about 3 months off weed, the brain starts to rebuild and heal itself, and not the cause and effect that is affected at the frontal cortex of the brain. Somehow those neurons start working, and cause and effect starts coming into play, and you actually do care about whether or not you're going to die. You actually do care about your loved ones. You actually do care about the people around you. So the time frame itself is very important.
Yes, exactly. And it did. It takes at least 3 months, like, for you to start feeling normalized again. And feeling normal without needing something is such a huge accomplishment that you can wake up and not need that to feel normal. Like, just to go out and do errands, you have to, like, use it. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah.
what it's so great.
Yeah, which is, so interesting, because people, like, we give, we're anti-slavery, and we're pro people's, rights and all that stuff. But there's nothing more enslaving than an addiction. Like, you have to focus on it every day, find it every day, go get it every day, make sure you have it and smoke it or do whatever you need to do with it every day. Chase it every day. It owns you. You are chained to that thing, and that thing has a hold of you like nothing else. I mean, I don't know. Like, if that's not slavery, I don't know what slavery is. And
Yeah.
then when you actually do come through it, whether it's a 12-step program or, because I know people who've come off weed and they're still having addictive thinking, without some kind of support program, without a 12-step program, without people doing the work like cognitive behavioral therapy to actually deal with the thinking of addiction, it's very difficult to come out of it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's life like since you gave up weed, ladies?
It's been great. It's been, like, amazing. I've been able to go back and do the things that I love to do, like play softball, be there for my children, have my children in my life every day, and that's been amazing. Hold a job, be able to work, because when I was in active addiction, I couldn't work because it was affecting my everyday life. Like you said, you need to get it, you need to find it, it just takes a hold of you. But being able to work and hold a job down was something I'm so proud of. And having
Mhm.
my kids in my life, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
And I think that's like there's lots of good things, but that's one of the things that is huge for me. Like, I can spend time with my children, and I don't spend 80% of it out on the doorstep smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm currently sober of weed for the past week. I'm 17 years old. I have trouble eating now, and I don't have an appetite, and I have trouble sleeping. I need help. All right, Daniel, you're in the right place. Reach out to us, Guardians of Recovery page. There's lots of people and lots of resources. In fact, we just finished the resource library, and there's over 95 resources, a lot of free coaching and counseling. People say you can't get help, lots of help. 12-step programs, NA programs, lived experience, Guardians of Recovery courses. We have programs happening online and in person. So tons and tons of resources. Reach out to us, and we will certainly help you, get you connected. And you can also go to detox, and you can go to a rehabilitation facility for weed addiction as well. So all of that. I'm so proud of you, my girl. Love you lots. Absolute slavery, someone says. Tracy says, absolutely. Yeah. So there are lots of more and more people understand the magnitude of cannabis use disorder, and more, with the numbers of people quadrupling since legalization, people with psychosis, the hospitals are very aware, the doctors are very aware, the rehabilitation centers are very aware, the people on the front lines are very aware. It's just the public that may not recognize it. We're kind of behind because it, was legalized. Now it's just getting infiltrated in as a thing to do by many people. And we haven't kind of hit that critical education level where everybody kind of understands the magnitude of how detrimental it can be to the brain, especially with those high THC levels, like blowing your brains out. And that's causing a lot of that psychosis where people are ending up in hospitals. And Sarah, as you said, the most frightening part of it is you end up with this psychosis where that psychosis could come back again at any time. It's something that you then have to live with for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Like that is such a scary thing. So even once you give up weed, you have got to focus on your mental health for the rest of your life. And you can't do it alone. You need people around you who understand what you're going through, people who can support you. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And Roxanne says, you both removed the demands in your lives and now living normal lives. It's got to be rewarding. And Charmaine says, Tina, you need no more podcasts on this weed thing for sure. Great job, ladies. And we have a wow.
Tina, can we talk about that for a second? Because I like I said, I started my recovery journey like 11 years ago, and for a long time I call them dry relapses. And I feel like a lot of people have this conception that we get clean and then we're better, and that's not the case, because like I said, I'm just over, like literally April 8th, I celebrated my 11 years in recovery. And I can tell you right now that even at times where I thought because it's not easy, it's worth every second. And I feel like it affected my self-esteem. It affected so many things in my life in a negative way, but I still had the thoughts, the cycle and repeat. Like I can't even, and I say it a lot, I don't know how I've made it this far.
Yeah.
I don't know if because initially when I went into detox, I was so sick. I don't want to be that sick again. I was lucky to have a support system. I reached out myself and asked my mom, like, can you come watch my kids so I can go detox? Like, I'll never forget how sick I was. But the mental part is excruciating, because you're constantly, and again, I'm 11 years in, minus the marijuana use, not to little it, because it's really, for me, it can't be littled, but it's literally the hardest, and I have to fight every single day to be where I'm to.
Yeah.
I'm almost 42 years old, and I'm only getting my self-worth and my self-esteem back now. Do you know what I mean? And I think like society just has to understand that it's not as cut and dry as us just going to detox or just going to rehab. Like we have to have good support systems and people that get that this ain't easy.
Yeah, for sure, because you're dealing with a brain illness that is there, and it doesn't just magically go away, like you said, because you stop using. It is a brain illness that requires support programs, and the fact that you have been able to kick your drug of choice, which is huge, because it's the drug of choice that really kicks in genetically. And it's the one that's the hardest to get over. So that's huge. But we often we will transfer one addiction to another. There's that too. Like, okay, so I got off this addiction and I haven't really dealt with myself, so I'm going to take on this addiction. It's like I gave up weed, now I'm going to go take on fixing a boyfriend that is not healthy for me. Or I'm going to take up alcohol, or I'm going to, because alcohol is not bad. I can go out for a few drinks and, it's socially acceptable. I don't have an issue with that, even though I've been dealing with addiction my whole life. So we tell ourselves stories that will justify things. And it is a lifelong battle because it is a brain disease. And for me, I think from what I've seen with my loved ones and dealing with my own life, like having people in support all around you and being in the conversation and helping other people, like literally to survive what I went through with Ben, I've had to help people every single day. Helping people has helped me survive. I believe that's also the answer for addiction. The more you help people, the more you get out of yourself and into other people's worlds, and you stand in their shoes and you have empathy and you contribute to others and you get busy working on your purpose in life. Like you said, you don't have time to think about smoking weed. It falls away, and you're doing phenomenal. You guys are so strong and so inspiring. And the fact that you keep at it and you keep doing it, that in alone, because as far as I'm concerned, from what I've seen in the world, overcoming addiction is one of the hardest things. And the people who do it are badasses. And they're amazing people in this world that are meant to be teachers and contributors to others. So I hope to be able to build sober living homes where, it's people like you guys who've gone through recovery that pave the way with your lived experience and tell us how to do it. How do we create sober living homes? How do we create sober living cities, sober villages, that kind of thing? So, and here, someone says, I can't thank you ladies enough for helping to educate. You're all such amazing people. That's indeed. And as your brain heals from the drugs, you will too. I realize how hard it is because I have a daughter who's in recovery for sure. And after that 3-month mark on the weed thing, that's a big doozy. That's a doozy for sure. Something changes after that period of time from what I've seen with my loved ones. So, anything else you want to say, ladies? An hour's up. It just goes by just like that. It's unbelievable. But I can't thank you enough for your contribution to the show, for being courageous enough to talk about this, because a lot of people will not get up and talk about this. It takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage. So you two amazing people, I can't thank you enough. And someone's kitty cat's there, I hear.
That's mine. They like to have my attention at all times.
Hi. Okay, well, that's our conversation. Super interesting conversation tonight about cannabis use disorder. Is weed an addiction? Can weed be addictive? Yes, it absolutely can, for the people who have that predisposition, not for the people who don't. And it's an amazing conversation. The more conversations we have like this, the better, because we're actually getting the things out there that need to be heard and need to be said. So thanks a million, ladies. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, Tina.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.